Okay, so this is a bit of a misnomer, right? I mean, you'll see how it works out. I mean, I've been doing this for a while, and I really enjoy giving talks to you guys because they're kind of semi-informal. Also, like see my attire, it's the weekend, so, you know, I'm not wearing a shirt for this. So, I know several jokes in sign language, and I guarantee you never heard them. Okay? And I also think that there's something wrong with the cactus that I'm trying to grow, but I can't put my finger on it. So for those of you who don't know, I have a deal with my daughter to always tell a dad joke before I start. So I was supposed to introduce myself. This is kind of like the boring bit, and you know I don't want to kind of belabor the point. I'm Googleable, so. But who am I really? I mean, I'm just kind of nearing the point in time where I'll be classified as elderly, so I'm supposedly like the perfect target for any targeted attacks. I don't know if that's true or not, but you know, your mileage may vary. I'm also constantly amazed at the stupidity that's going on in INFOSEC. So what we'll do, I think, is I'll tell you two stories, and then we'll bring them together, and you know, I'll make my point. The first story will be concerning like my favorite defense project. Those of you who have listened to me talk previously, know already about this. This will be a new story, of course, but you know, they're really my favorite people in the world. It's a project working with EDA, the European Defense Agency, and it's just omnishambles. It's just horrendous. I mean, right now we're about 20 months late with payments. I mean, we've done all the work like about 11 months ago, but the guy who is running the project just can't get his finger out, and he just didn't submit the final report. And this happened before, and I don't want to talk about this. It's just like, so for you to get a context, right? About defense projects. So the first story is essentially at one point in time, so we're dealing with some sort of conveyance, so I can't tell you much because hush hush and stuff, but we're dealing with some sort of conveyance, and I am ostensibly in charge of developing like secure solutions and trying, testing it, etc., etc. Specifically from the point of human attack vectors, which is what I'm interested in. So at one point in time, so we do like 2 field experiments, right? We are invited to a foreign military base where they deal with heavy ordnance, and they kind of have tanks driving around and stuff like that. And we're invited to test our attacks on the prototype. So the way this works is it's kind of like the admittance procedure is kind of complicated. So because this is a foreign country, it's in the EU, but it's still, it's not Slovenia. So you can't just walk into a military base, just off the street, apparently. We'll see how this works. But ostensibly you can't. So the way it works is you initially have to have the foreign MOD talk to your MOD, Ministry of Defense, and then your Ministry of Defense says, so do you want to go? And then you say yes, and you provide the information, like your passport, your security clearance, your name, your photograph, etc. And then they create a document which they send to the foreign MOD, and then the foreign MOD allows you visiting for like at a specified window in time, right? So that's how the procedure works, initially, like the pre-procedure. So once you get the approval, you get there to the military base, and you provide the ID that you provided when you applied for this. You think that's needed, but essentially the way it works is there's a guy behind like a bulletproof glass. You hand them a document, and then they have a handwritten page with names on it, and then they check whether your name is on the register, and then they photocopy the ID, and then they give you the ID, which looks like this. It's a piece of plastic, so there is no RFID or anything like that. So the way it works is there's a logo of the project, which I've kind of blurred for confidentiality's sake. There's a logo, there's your name, and the country. And that's it. And with this, you can move around in the military base. They just let you through, and then you wander around. So we are told that we are not supposed to take the photo of the ID and not to take it out of the base. Okay? So in practice, when we are there, so this was an experiment, well, these were military maneuvers that lasted for 3 days, and the guy who was our host said, so if you're coming tomorrow, just don't return the ID because, you see, it's a procedure. You have to have your ID scanned again and stuff like that. Just take it home. And then tomorrow, just flash it when you go past the gate, and that's it. I mean, he just wants to make it easier for us, right? And also, this is me in front of the base and in front of a huge sign saying, do not take photographs. So just so we're clear about security. There are people in the back, you can see like a small building. There's windows, and they can see you doing it, but nobody does anything. This is outside the base anyway, so it's kind of moot whether they can forbid me taking pictures or not. So takeaway messages from like this story. So no one checks the ID for forgery, so the ID that I give them, okay? And also no one really deeply checks the ID that I'm using. And it would be like exceedingly easy to duplicate. I mean, we all have IDs, right, like this. So it's just a piece of plastic that, or something is printed on it. So the other question is, why is the soldier that you hand in your personal ID, why are they behind the bulletproof glass? I mean, are there very many people who are trying to shoot their way into a base? I mean, how often that happens? Why do they need to be protected? Also, the ID has no RFID tags, as I said. It's a piece of plastic. There is no photo on it. So, but that's kind of pointless, right? I mean, it wouldn't be harder to duplicate or fake with a photo. You could just put any photo on it. So no one enforces the rules because the rules are silly anyway. And also, I'm certain it would take just from this photo, from the previous photo of me, like in front of the military base, it would probably take minutes for like an OSINT operator to actually find the GPS location. It's kind of pointless anyway. The secrecy. And then they could go on Google Maps and check it out, or just drive to it and see it from the outside. Nobody would stop it. There's a huge parking lot in front of it. So, some attack vectors. You could find out the name of the project and then the name of the people visiting, okay? So, and that wouldn't be hard because the name of the project is listed on the European Defense Agency webpage with the participants, at least, the companies that participate. So it wouldn't be that hard to find out who are the people who would be coming. So if you want to make doubly sure to not get caught, you find out the name of the project so you could put in a logo, just fake an ID. Or you can just sign up. Just make doubly sure, not to have the person who is actually visiting come then. And there are various ways of getting people not to come although they wanted to, right? So you could just show up, with an ID because nobody just checks. They will just photocopy it. That's fine. You can do your stuff, while they're checking it, if they do. And there will be a name on the piece of paper, so you're fine. You can just wander around the base if you wanted to. I don't know why would you want to, but surely you could do it. You could print a card with the project logo and show up the second day. So, for example, people like me, I just came for 1 day. It was boring anyway. I didn't want to stay there for 3 days. There was nothing for me to do. Because, this is another story, but they really didn't want me to do any kind of security testing because they were worried that I might find something. So I was forbidden to do any active tests anyway. So I just showed up and just for fun's sake, just to tell you how this worked, it's like in the first meeting that we had, the first field trial, like my whole presentation was essentially 15 slides that were completely blank and just said censored on them, because I prepared the presentation, showed it to the consortium leader, and they said, oh, you can't disclose this. It's all private information. These are all attacks on real people, so you can't really disclose it to anybody else. And this was like about an hour before the presentation. So I just basically said, there was like a welcome slide explaining what we were doing, and then there were 15 blank slides, and then thank you for listening. Well, they didn't allow me to do it, so yeah. So this is the first story. The second story is I'm in Brussels, right? And I'm at one of the three-letter agencies. We have some sort of meeting with like head honchos or like bigwigs or whatever. And their security is like slightly better, but still. So what you need to do is you need to apply for a visitor's badge. You get a form, and then you fill in the details, and then you submit it. But you submit it on your own, to the three-letter agency. And once there, you need to give them an ID, and they program the card for you. So clearly, if any kind of ID that you submit yourself, you can then present, okay? So you can already see an attack vector there. So then they print the card in front of you, and you need to have a sponsor to come and pick you up. And if you kind of leave the premises and then come back again, you need to be with like somebody who's working for the three-letter agency, who then says, oh no, he's with me. And that's fine, okay, and then they let you in. So this is what the ID looks like. It's on my jacket. And here you can get an ID more than once. You cannot get in with the ID more than once into this three-letter agency, but you can leave as often as you want, okay? So the way it works is like the first time you need to tag yourself in, but then if you leave, you need to be with somebody who says, oh, they're with me, or just tailgate someone, and you can get in. So as long as you do whatever you want to do inside, then you're free to leave whenever you want, and how often you want to do it. And I know that this works because we left for lunch. And I also went for drinks with the guy that I met there, I knew there from this three-letter agency. And I'll explain it now. So our meeting was in a specific part of the building, right? It's like a corridor in like the ground floor. And the whole corridor, it turns out, so no one has permanent access, okay? So not even people who are the organizers of the meeting. They have to apply for access, and they get access for a specific time slot. So you can't get in or out. I mean, you for sure can't. And there's this person who only has access on specific time of day, okay? So it's brilliant. You're totally locked in, and you can't get out. I mean, as I found out, because really, I kind of sent an email to the guy that I knew from this three-letter agency. It turned out that my time was come. So I was there for a meeting, but my meeting, I was supposed to be there at 8:30 or 9, and my meeting actually started at 3, like the part that I was actually concerned with. So I showed up, and I was like in this corridor, totally locked out from the world, and there was really nothing for me to do. So I said, I sent an email to the guy, and I said, want to go for a drink? And they said yes, but then it turned out he couldn't let me out. I mean, he's working for the three-letter agency, doesn't have access. So I had to found out like my sponsor, I had nobody's phone numbers anyway, so it was just emails, kind of trying to get the guy to come and let me out of the corridor. It was just hilarious. So one thing that you have to do is you need to hand in your mobile phone into a secure locker, and then they lock it like in the corridor, at the beginning of the corridor, but no one checks. So for example, this is a photo I've taken in the bathroom in the corridor, with my mobile phone, because like really nobody asked me to. Well, they said, so here are some instructions, and then they left. And the instructions said, leave your phone there in the locker. So I just didn't read them, so didn't know. So takeaway messages. What if in the pre-announcement I submit different details, right? Like a different passport ID. So I don't know whether they check or not. I mean, clearly because it's the EU, I mean, they might actually have access to these databases, so that might be slightly tricky. So I don't know, I haven't tested it. I had legitimate reasons to be there, so I actually used my own passport. So I went out for drinks with the person, and because my job started, as I said, and I took the card with me. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I mean, the card has some sort of RFID in it, but I managed to take it outside, so we could scan it, I suppose. So as long as I have accomplished anything that I wanted to accomplish in the building, I can always leave. Okay, so it's just the entry that's problematic. So no one checks if you left your phone, and there is a guest Wi-Fi, which doesn't work. Okay, so there was no way. I said, so there were some people who actually used, the guest Wi-Fi, but they were like long-standing co-workers of this three-letter agency. And I said, so does this work? And they were like, well, you can try it. I mean, it works for me. And then I tried it, and it just didn't work. However, my 5G worked, so so I just used mobile data in a secure part of the building. So what you could do, I suppose, is you could apply with a different ID. So I don't know whether they check or not. I was out of the building with the card twice, so I could scan it, try to see, whether there is some way to duplicate it. I don't know. It's checkable, certainly. So nothing would be stopping from someone, from coming in the building with my card, just with some guy working for the three-letter agency saying, oh, they're with me. Okay? So as long as you have some sort of card, I mean, as long as somebody vouches for you, that's fine. So I could leave the building, swap places with somebody else, and somebody else could come in. I could have taped the meeting easily if I wanted to. I mean, I also had the laptop, which you don't have to stow away. I mean, they insisted on using their laptop for some work that we did there. However, nobody complained because I had like my laptop next to it, opened up because I had some notes on it, and that was completely fine. Nobody found it like problematic in any way. So what is the point of even personnel not having a permanent access to a corridor that's essentially a bunch of empty rooms? So I mean, why? Why would you want to do this? And so that's essentially my point. From the first story, security only works if we accept the rules, right? Not fake an identity card, return the ID when we're asked, not take photos of like a military installation. From the second story, same story, security only works if we accept the rules, right? So not swap cards, hand in your phone, not jump through the window on the ground floor corridor where all the windows are shut except the ones in the toilet. Which is conveniently out of the way and lockable. So what's this talk about? I mean, I said how to communicate essentially at the beginning. So it's about how we make assumptions, right? So even people who work in security, there is an assumption that people will follow the rules, right? So most of security is done in a way where the people who design it essentially believe that there is one way this can go. I tell the user what they should do, and then they do it, right? And I design the whole secure apparatus, taking into account that people will do exactly what I expect them to do, okay? So we expect them to behave. We expect people not to be rude, right? We expect them not to copy cards. We expect them essentially not to ignore the rules, okay? And mostly, one of the reasons for that is similarity. So I think I might have actually spoken about this in one of the previous talks, so I won't belabor the point. But just to very quickly summarize, so similarity is a psychological concept which says that we believe that people are essentially similar to ours, okay? To us. In essence, if we are honest, we intrinsically believe that other people are honest too, okay? If we're dishonest, same thing, okay? So this is not something that we check, okay? This is not something that we do consciously. We just sort of assume that people are like us, okay? So why is this salient, or why is this pertinent in general case and in my research? Well, essentially, first of all, this is the reason why you've probably heard this story. When you talk to scammers, and scammers say, "Oh, you cannot cheat an honest man." That's absolute bullshit. It's a lot easier to cheat an honest man than a dishonest one, because an honest man or a woman, not to be like, gender discriminatory, will assume, if they're honest, they will assume that the scammer is honest too, because of similarity. So it's easier to scam. It's easier to cheat an honest man than a dishonest one, okay? So here it's the same thing, similarity. So we as security professionals, if we're not very careful, we just assume that people are like us, so that they will follow the rules. If the rules are presented to us in a way that we find reasonable or sensible, okay? But we have different threat models, of course, so what's sensible to you might not be sensible to a black hat. So yeah, so I won't belabor the point, but one of the reasons might be, that we assume this whole thing. I mean, in the three-letter agency, same thing. They just assume that I will follow all the rules, that that I won't tailgate, that I won't copy the card, that I will present the correct credentials. I mean, I was kind of wandering around Brussels, and at one point in time we went to the European Commission, and there's a whole apparatus there. I mean, you can't just walk in. I mean, first of all, you need to have a visitor card, even if it's from a different three-letter agency. And then, the people who work there just kind of go like through one scanner, and there's another scanner for visitors, and they take you around the back. I mean, and then they don't shoot you, but you go in the back, and they scan you like completely, et cetera, et cetera. However, I mean, you're there with somebody, because otherwise you can't get in anyway. So what's stopping me from just giving some stuff to the person who's walking in, or just putting it into their luggage or putting it into their stuff, and because they will just walk through. So there's all kinds of bizarre things. Also, don't get me started, like European Commission and the toilets. I mean, what's wrong with these people? I mean, it's like it's a freaking maze. It's kind of like there's a signpost saying toilet, and then you walk for 15 minutes like through different corridors, and there's like and you open 7 doors, and it's just like one corridor after another that's about this wide, and it's like there's like no doors on each side, and there's just like one door kind of leading you to another corridor with like 3 doors, and there's like one sign I mean, who designed this? I mean, this was probably like a social experiment or something like that, but let's not get there. So what is this talk about? It's how it was ostensibly about how we communicate security, right? With an assumption that we are talking to people who already want to behave honestly, right? So this is the problem. So we kind of communicate this, but we make an assumption that the person who is listening is not antagonistic to us, okay? We kind of we have like, I don't know if you actually, I mean, this kind of really dates me, but there was an old comic, or cartoon called The Duckman. And the Duckman is like an anti-hero, and he constantly gets into lots of trouble, and he's constantly like abused. And one of his like favorite sayings is, "Why don't we all just get along?" And I think this is often like the underlying premise when we do like security. Why don't we all, I mean, clearly we have the same goal, right? We want to make this place more secure. I mean, it works up to a point if you you're talking to like the employees of a company, but it doesn't really work if there is like a black hat in the room. I mean, you don't have the same goal. So the whole point is not to get along. The whole point is that we don't agree to stuff. And so what's the correct way to talk about security? So it's neither to scare, nor to cuddle. I mean, both backfire. But it's simply to assume that your motivation is not the same as the motivation of the people who are listening to you. Okay? So if you want to communicate security, what you really need to do is you need to explain in non-derogatory terms, or not like not coaching it in bad and evil, but what the consequences of not following the things are. Okay? And don't make assumptions that people will just follow the rules because you ask them to. Okay? So the way you communicate security is essentially like talking to a toddler. Be quite motherly, but at the same time make it very clear what the consequences are if people don't follow. But don't scare them. So right now, the world, it's ripe for people who don't follow the rules. I mean, for example, I just see the US administration. And I was thinking, because when I was in Brussels, this was last year, I was wandering around and I was thinking, all of this works only because we sort of agree that it works. I mean, none of this security means much. If there's a determined attacker who doesn't want to follow the rules. I mean, and I was thinking, all of this can implode. I mean, there's so many situations in security and in defense, and specifically in the defense forces, where there's an assumption that people will follow some sort of chivalric code. For somebody who's determined and doesn't really care, I mean, this is all wide open. And this is something that we need to address and we need to think about. So, yeah, so we need to be careful about that. Also, this is true in other contexts. So I started a bit early, so I can talk about this if you're interested. So just to put it into other contexts, if you want to. Would you like to? Okay. So some of you know me, and you know that I'm also a psychotherapist by trade. So psychotherapy is kind of similar. I'll explain what I mean by that. So it's a caste system, right? So it's a guild system, in essence. You have to have, in order to get your own certificate to be a psychotherapist, you need to have a mentor, really. I mean, somebody who decides that they will take you on, and then they train you, and then they propose you to guidance committee or whatever, or a steering committee, that you can actually take an exam. Okay? It's a very involved process. Different types of psychotherapy require different types of investment. The one that I'm trained in has about 97% dropout rate. Okay? So about 3% of people who actually start the training actually finish it. I'm not saying this to brag. I'm just saying it's a very, very steep curve. Okay? So, and the way you do it, the way you actually get to the point where you can actually get certified is you need to do lots of sessions. You need to work with people and have supervision, from your mentor, and they advise you in how you should work. And you are required to do, depends, I mean, they tell you, but it's usually about 100 to 200 hours of individual work with patients before you can actually even start doing the exam. So you're required to do work with people while not having a certificate, but having a phone number from from your mentor, and you always say to your potential patient, you say, so I'm in training, if you're uncomfortable or if you don't want to work with a trainee, here's a phone number of my mentor, they can vouch for me. Okay, so this is how it works. So two things connected to this. At one point in time, I'm asked to do, to consult with a relative's daughter. She wants to talk to me about something or other. I'm at that point in time, I have a master's. I'm already a trained psychotherapist. So, this lady, she's not academically really gifted, and she kind of always has all these schemes. And she decides she wants to open a kindergarten, and their father asks me to talk to her about this, a private kindergarten. Totally uneducated for this, totally untrained. She is. And we started talking about this, and she said, "Oh, I've read lots of books, dude. So there are like so interesting concepts. I mean, for example, I don't know if you're familiar with the concept, but like emotional intelligence." And to me, it's like, you do realize that I have like 25 years of training. And you're kind of, and basically what she did was she opened a kindergarten, and then later on, she opened like her own consulting business. And nobody stopped her, you see? And people in the business of psychotherapy, they're all upset about folks just like doing, just doing consultations, doing therapy without any kind of license. So at one point in time, there's just an assumption. So this is where we get to the point, right? Because there's an assumption that you will follow all the rules, jump through all the hoops. I mean, it took me 15 years to get my license. Jump through all the hoops, because otherwise you're not worthy. However, nobody can actually physically stop you from opening a consulting service right now, okay? If you get the patients, I mean, they might not be served well, but really, nobody can stop you. There is no law, or there could be a law, I suppose, but nobody enforces it because there is a need, right? So what I'm saying, if you just blatantly ignore the rules, nobody is stopping you. There is an assumption that you will follow them, okay? But if you don't, you're unstoppable. And same thing should be assumed in security. Any questions? I can repeat it. I can repeat the question if you want. Yeah.
So I really liked your metaphor saying that systems essentially are secure only if we assume that people will follow some code of honor.
Mm.
But this holds for most human design systems, as you argued. And
yeah.
in particular, I think it holds for democracy. So you can just say no comment. But
yeah, I agree. Go and vote. Tomorrow there are votes in Slovenia. There's voting, so go and vote. Thank you for mentioning it. My wife said that, so I have, you see, I have a little badge saying bolje levi kot hyene. And my wife said, so, oh, this is a university. You're not supposed to like be politically inclined. So I just put it on my backpack, not on my shirt. But like my stance is clear.
You entering this military facility remind me of the people that want to attend uninvited weddings, or maybe going to a lunch in a hotel or a dinner.
Yeah.
So what I would like to comment here is, of course, you could forge all that badges and you could enter in, but then you would have to be really calm, and you have to know, you had to be trained for that, because I think that people in the entrance, usually those policemen are trained to spot nervous people.
Yeah.
And they are trained to ask questions which may intimidate you. So this is security for most of the people, I would say, but for really trained, let's say, agents that would enter such a facility, no one can stop them.
Yeah, but also, you see, the simile is us taking off our shoes at the airport. Right? It's the same exact principle. It's designed for people who will never have explosives in their shoes. Okay? So it's just for the regular folks, to be inconvenienced, because no terrorist ever in the world will now have liquid explosives in their shoes. I mean, because they're checking. So it's like, it's security that's, I mean, I see some of my students here. So this is something that I talk about in security of organizations, I mean, in the module. So essentially security playing catch up. But as you say, yeah, you need to be calm, but being in the military is not essentially, this is not a cure-all. So I used to spend a lot of time with a good friend of mine who used to be in the military, He used to be in the Royal Navy and then in the Norwegian Navy later on. And he was in charge, he was an instructor in INFOSEC for the last few months, where he was like 6 months in Norway at a NATO base. And he, for the joke of it, for the fun of it, once he knew he was leaving, he would test like the perimeter security. So what is supposed at any NATO base is that once you get like to the door, you need to show your ID, and the person at the door needs to check it, and they need to check it against the register. In practice, what you do is you wave your ID and they wave you through because they know who you are. So my friend Kieran, he, for 3 months, like for 2 months, 2 out of 3 months, he used his library card to get into it. And then for the last month, he used a slice of cheese. and they just let him through. And there was a point in time where he said, so we were together at Cambridge, we were working there. And he said, so, don't be upset, David, but what I applied this for like a NATO, naval conference in Estonia. And I told them that we would arrive from a NATO base to give our talk. And I was like, okay, so how does this work? And he's like, well, you're not supposed, if you're not military personnel, you're not supposed to, to come from a NATO base. And I'm like, okay, so like, first of all, I mean, let's just agree right now, I'm not shaving my head. Okay, I'm not taking off my hair. Let's just agree. And he was like, oh no, there's no need. No, that's perfect. Do you speak Russian? And I was like, well, I speak Slavic languages. So he's kind of like, yeah, okay, that's fine. So I'll just say one word, special forces. So do you have like army fatigues? Like, or some sort of fatigues, or it could be like torn jeans. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, so long hair, beard, murmur in like some Slavic language, like under your breath. I'll be in full uniform. We'll just pass through. Nobody will stop you. Nobody, and just don't make any eye contact with anybody. Just walk behind me and just murmur to yourself. Nobody will stop you. Because like special forces people are kind of insane. So, they will let us go, for sure. So yeah, so it's kind of like, we didn't actually do this, because what we understood at one point in time is that we would be like personas non gratas in Estonia from then on if we actually managed to do this kind of thing. But I think it will work. I think this is in my other talks, and we've been discussing this before. I mean, we sort of have this mystique about the military and like the defense forces and stuff like that, but like, it's like the security is so shoddy. It's a wonder we're not like all the time taken out, destroyed. I mean, it's a wonder there's any like naval ship that is still floating in NATO. It's a wonder, really. I mean, all of this is like eminently hackable. Like the other story that I was thinking about, but it didn't happen to me, so I didn't want to talk about this, but it's same context, was that like my friend Kieran was actually, he was part of like the Norwegian Navy created like this ship, this vessel that was like, zero radar footprint, zero LiDAR footprint, kind of like, all like broken surfaces and, special paint that would absorb light and whatever. And they said like, nobody can track us. There's just no way. And Kieran was like, okay, in 2 days, I'm going to have GPS location of this vessel. And they were like, nobody could do it. And so like, he did it in like a few hours, as soon as like the maneuver started. And what he did, he just called them. And he called them over the, long frequency, ultra low frequency radio, and he just said, "I'm Admiral so-and-so. What's your position, soldier?" And that was it. And they sort of started giving him some jip, and he just kind of went into like full Admiral mode and just started screaming at them and like, are you answering me back, soldier? Like immediately your position, etc. And they just gave it to him. And so. Yeah, and then he presented it to the steering committee of the exercise, and they were like, "Oh, you were cheating," and so on. So, but he was like, "I can do it again, because no matter what you tell them, I can have this again and again and again and again. I will just call under a different pretense." There's just because this is the thing. So I do work with military a lot, and one thing that really works against them is they're trained to follow orders. Okay. So as soon as you're an authority figure, I mean, it's also really brilliant if you want to do experiments with the military, because soldiers can't say no. So whatever if you have like commanding officers on board, they will do any kind of experiments you want, you know, the soldiers, because they can't say no. So, but that makes them really vulnerable in some ways, because they can't say no, okay? Any other question? I hope that answered your, I mean, it was like, it just kind of led me on a rant, but yeah.
So you're just assuming all of the systems are basically complete. How can you know that they're not honeypots?
Sorry?
How would you not, like, are you able to tell that a system is not designed to be a honeypot?
No,
Like,
no, you can't. I mean,
just trying to catch you, you know?
Yeah,
like
that's
trying to
awesome.
set it up to look like it's harmless, like it's
Yeah, I
vulnerable,
know what
and
honeypots
then
are.
yeah.
It's you can't really do. You can't know, but in some cases, for example, it would be a really elaborate honeypot if they had to build a building in Brussels for me to enter to kind of sort of assume that it's a honeypot. That would be like, I mean, if they're that good, I mean, then that's fine. I mean, that's not a problem. I mean, I just can't compete with that. But otherwise, I mean, also like military bases and like, you know, having tanks around, if it's a honeypot, well, kudos to you. It's also a problem because, in essence, in order to create a realistic honeypot of a military base, you would have to use technologies that are in actual bases. So, you know, what's the point of a honeypot then? If I can actually do industrial espionage in a honeypot, for real. But yeah, you don't know. Any other question?
So I think we will.
We're done, right?
We will, yeah. So an applause for David, please.
Thank you.